No, and
I
fix this. People ask me a lot about that.
Sorry, I got my mask. Me also. Supposedly we're allowed to.
He's doing nice.
Oh, good. That goes a far, far way. There's nobody, but nobody getting into the trade. So.
Hello.
Hello. How are you? Even though we don't agree.
In the circle, was it?
I'm not putting all the windows in my house. I'm not there.
That's right. You're right.
Here, you can practice here.
Mr. Solomon.
Then I go there and say, this square. That's right.
We're doing a job.
Yeah, that's right.
For God's sakes, I'm not into water or sewer. I'm only into electric. No. Well, hey. So anyway.
Same place.
I see the folks, the regular.
Yeah, well, we.
Oh, yeah. Except this is not. Yeah, just make me a co-host.
Actually, all right, Helen, you should be able to screen share now.
Oh.
It's right.
Yeah, the 30. Yeah, right.
Good. Okay. Nick gave me the high sign, so I guess we're ready. Good evening, everyone. The flag is outside there, so if we could just at least face the flag, stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. This is the public hearing for the proposed Swan Lake Sewer Plant expansion and renovations, upgrade. Tonight, we're going to have a brief presentation. Delaware Engineering is going to present the project that we discussed at the 2 meetings ago. And we'll entertain any questions with regards to the presentation after that. And then we'll take public comment here for people that are here that wish to address, and they'll just come up to the microphone. And please, when you come up to make public comment, state your name. All right, that would, anything else, Lori? Just their name? They're good? Yeah. Okay, and then we'll take any additional public comments from folks that are on Zoom. Public comment period will be open until April 27th. Anyone who wants to make a comment can email my office at Supervisor DeMayo at townofliberty.org, Supervisor DeMayo at townofliberty.org. So that comment period will be open until the 27th. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the folks from Delaware Engineering and carry on, folks. Appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks for being here this evening.
Good evening, everybody. Some familiar faces in the crowd, but some new ones as well. My name is Dave Oman. I'm a partner of Delaware Engineering, and Mary Beth Bianconi is a partner as well. She's here tonight. She'll share the presentation, and Helen Budrock, our senior planner, is here as well. So some familiar faces on all avenues here. Thank you for coming to the public hearing tonight for this important project. The Swan Lake wastewater treatment plant upgrade has been discussed for decades. We've been involved since 2014 with the town, looking at numerous alternatives, from fixing small things at the plant to the full upgrade. And tonight we're pleased to be here to share with you the information on what the town has plans to move forward with. And we'll go through our presentation, and then at the end we'll feel free to take some questions. No? Not working. That's why you like backup.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
There you go.
Just one thing is, does anyone want a copy of the presentation if you don't have it?
Here, Dave, I'll pass them.
Okay, great. That helps you to follow along if it's hard to see or hard to read. Here's some quick facts on the sewer district. Most of you are from the sewer district and you're familiar with it. The plant, its current capacity is 425,000 gallons a day. That's a 30-day average. And the plant was built in 1986. And a lot of us can remember 1986 like it was yesterday, but that's quite a long time ago. And the service life on a treatment plant for the mechanical portion is typically in anywhere from 20 to 35 or 40 years. The concrete portion will last longer, and but from the standpoint of the treatment plant itself, there's been no significant improvements at the plant in a number of years. This hearing tonight is being held in accordance with Section 202B. So in essence, that's a law that's on the state books that allows for public input and a process to be followed whenever the town in this instance is contemplating a large capital improvement. The existing plant is shown here. If you haven't been to the site, it's basically up on top of the hill. Come down Swan Lake Road, and you run up a long and circuitous driveway, and you come to the wastewater plant. It's not something that's commonly seen by the public, and it's sort of tucked in there. But the main processes here is you have the incoming wastewater that comes down here into the influent area where it receives some manual screening, grit removal, and then it's pumped up the hill into the processes, which include oxidation ditches and secondary clarifiers. Sludge is collected in a sludge holding tank, and at this point, it's sent down the hill to sludge drying beds, which is a gravity process that's subject to nature for dewatering. The outfall runs back down the hill and discharges to the creek over through this tributary to the Manga. Primary system components we talked about. It does have UV disinfection, which is seasonal, and I think most of the other points I touched on. If you help. Why upgrade now? This is the big question, and I think I touched on it. Basically, a lot of the pieces of the plan are worn out, and Stacy and his crew have done a great job of keeping O&M down, keeping capital expenses down for a number of years. But at some point, just like at your home, things wear out. And we're really to that point. We've been at that point with several of these processes through the years. And there's also new technologies, which are much more efficient than what we do now for the same bang for your buck. There are some current O&M issues as well as regulatory issues. All of you who are from the sewer district are familiar that there's seasonal variations in flows. So we have higher flows during the summer months. That season, according to Stacy and looking at the records, is extending now, where it isn't just 1 or 2 months. We're getting more and more flow over time as people become more full-time residents and there's other developments here. We know with COVID-19, we have more people up here for longer periods of time, and we see that coming in the future as well. So that seasonal nature isn't just going to be 1 or 2 months anymore. Right now, it seems to be extending. So that's important, and that's important because while it feels like we have a plant that only has a problem for a few months out of the year, the state regulations require you to be in compliance every month out of the year. There's no rolling average that says, well, we'll look at 12 months and we'll just grant you permit limits for that. Every month, we've got to hit those numbers. So while a number of the months out of the year, we may be in great shape, there's several months right now where we're up against compliance issues. Some of the real long-term issues that we've been looking at with the board and the sewer department since we've been involved since 2014 involve rags that come down and basically block the screenings in the influent, which creates a lot of O&M issues for Stacy and his crew. They've had to come in and weekends and work out things, as well as, and the rags aren't only just blocking the headworks portion. They actually make their way into the processes. These oxidation ditches, which are up in here, have jet aerators in them, and you can see the bubbles that are on top of this tank. And what the rags do is you have a diffused air header that runs down into the tank. See this brown pipe? There's drop legs that go down in here. And what's attached to those are things that look just like a nozzle head on an old school hose, right? They're like triangular shaped nozzles that basically push air into the tank. And what's happened and what continues to happen is that the rags that make their way into the process get up in here and blind off those diffusers, if you want to call it that, or those jets that are in there, such that particularly in the summer, we have an inability to process the wastewater due to a lack of dissolved oxygen. These biological tanks, these oxidation ditches, basically are full of bacteria, which break down the biological matter in there, and without adequate aeration, that process is compromised. It doesn't remove the biological oxygen demand pieces, and it also doesn't adequately process your ammonia. So those are compliance issues which the plant and the town has been struggling with for a number of years. In addition, sludge processing. Right now, those drying beds are an issue in that during wet weather or when we need to waste the most sludge, which is in the summer. If we have a wet summer where those beds are gravity beds, envision sand and you push these brown solids out on top of the sand. That wants to drain away. But when you don't have adequate dry weather and sunshine, that stuff doesn't drain, and we can't adequately get rid of enough solids out of the plant. So that's been another issue for us there, as well as flow capacity limitations. We're right up against the treatment plant capacity on a number of months. So why upgrade now? Those are sort of the problems. And why upgrade now? The town received, a number of you already know this, received a letter from New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation that made them eligible for hardship financing for plant improvements. Hardship financing is a 30-year 0% loan. And you basically have until the end of this year to get a project financing agreement in place. They give you 2 years from the date of the letter. And what that means is we have between now and December to complete our application and get it in, or else we will lose the eligibility for that hardship. And you can say, well, let's just go ahead and go for it again. The hardship eligibility is a competitive process. There's a funding line in there that they look at every year. There's an intended use plan where they get all this information in with applications and they score the projects. And there's a physical line that's drawn based on a number of factors. And for this plant back in 2019, we were good. We were above the line where we got funded. This year on the IUP list, our current scoring for this project actually is below the line, meaning that if we would have applied this past year for this year, we would not have made it. So just saying, well, we can put this off a little longer and apply again. With the competitive nature of this, and remember, you're not the only plant that's 35 or 40 years old. We're involved with probably 10 or 15 plants right now, either planning, design, or construction, that are in the same boat as you. So this isn't an anomaly. Everybody's going for this money. So this is an important, it's a very important issue for that to move forward. And then DEC permit, regulatory permit limits. As more treatment plants get added to your water bodies, the ability for permit limits to be more restricted increase. And Mary Beth can talk a little bit more about that because she's been involved in it regularly. We went and asked DEC as part of the planning process probably 8 months ago. We're considering a capacity increase at Swan Lake. What does that mean for our permit? And they came back to us and said, well, because of the nature of your receiving water, your limits will get stricter if you want to increase the capacity of your plant. So I know I'm taking a little right-hand turn here, but that's not only because of our plant, but also because there's more development coming into our area. A water body has a fixed amount of ability to receive wastewater, treated wastewater. It has a capacity to deal with that in a natural way. And as more entities go into those water bodies, there's a finite capacity in there. So that decreases over time. And as they generate more permits, limits get more strict. So it's a game. The real reason to do the upgrade is, number one, your plant's wearing out, whether or not you were going for capacity. Secondly, you have a great opportunity to get 0% financing. And third, we know that permit limits are going to be more increased as development increases and time goes on. Next slide. Why more capacity? We talked about the seasonal capacity limitations and how that's increasing over time. And we know that the planning board has already approved a number of developments that have basically put the plant right up to its permitted capacity. And we know that those developments are moving forward. We also know that there's other developments that want to come in that are within the sewer district. So it's important to look at capacity overall. Right now, there's really no room to accommodate additional growth that's beyond the current capacity, that's beyond what's currently approved based on our estimates. So that's important. This little graphic here looks at your current capacity that was needed, that we estimated just to handle the approved development, and then the capacity that the board has decided to go for, which is 686,000 gallons a day, which will accommodate basically the planned developments that are already within the sewer district. What's important is that doesn't include, and most of you know that we were originally proposing a plant that was almost 1 million gallons, because that looked at the projected build out of the whole sewer district, plus the ability to add some adjacent properties that were right nearby that we knew wanted to develop. the town board has considered all your comments and all the issues carefully. And basically has come back to a compromise position that says, we're not going to go to here. We're basically going to look at development within the district, recognizing that even at 686,000 gallons, we don't estimate that to be enough to do what we believe would be the building. There's all sorts of how much will be needed in the future. Who knows? That would depend on what development is in there. But right now we're in a compromise position of accommodating what we know is approved on the books right now, as well as stuff that we know is in the hopper with some ability to add some other development. Recent town board actions. Basically, we just touched on that to increase the capacity. To address the existing problems, which we talked about, aging equipment, rags, sludge processing limitations. And we've done this through a combination of reusing and repurposing whatever facilities we could that exist at the plant, and with limited addition of some new facilities, which will be needed going forward. And then to employ advanced waste treatment to deal with the stricter permit limits that we'll be up against. Recent town board actions on the March 31st, that they resolved to proceed with a plan of 686,000 gallons a day and a maximum project cost of $18 million. And resolved to proceed with this hearing tonight, was done on April 5th, and to basically move forward to complete the EFC hardship application by May 31, 2021. Recommended upgrades. If you look on your drawings, basically we're going to repurpose the oxidation ditches to deal with advanced waste treatment. Key new items which are needed to deal with the rags as well as capacity is a new headworks building, and in there we'll have automatic mechanical screens as well as grit removal, and then new higher capacity influent pumps, as well as a new force main, because the existing ones are not of adequate size for the capacity that will come up here and tie into the plant. The second new item would be the sludge dewatering building, which is up here adjacent to the plant. And that would be a process that would include mechanical dewatering. Rather than relying solely on the old drying beds, which are down here, you would be able to process sludge basically when the operators wanted to. And what that means is we'll take sludge from 10,000 parts per million up to 20 times that number. What does that mean? It's really huge volume reductions, and it allows the operators to operate that piece of equipment so that they're not sludge limited. Why is sludge processing important? Inside of these biological treatment tanks, there's a balance in there, and that you want to maintain a certain concentration of biological solids. When you're unable to waste sludge out of that process, you're not able to keep viable microorganisms in there. They get old, you end up with situations where that doesn't process the wastewater enough. If you aren't able to process sludge adequately, you basically have a system backup, right? Visualize it like a sewer pipe where the flow can't get out. We can't run the treatment plant properly unless we're able to adequately get rid of solids. So this new dewatering process will allow them to not have to rely on the drying beds, and basically allow them to work and waste sludge on an as-needed basis and produce a solid, basically a dry solid that would look like I want to say peat moss, but finer than that. It's almost like a clay-like material where it becomes in a static pile, and that will be disposed of. So that's an important matter. And the third new item would be the advanced waste treatment building, where in here you would have the new controls, you would have blowers, you would have things that are needed to run the new processes that are in those tanks. As far as site work, you would have a new force main. The outfall down in this area would get expanded because of the increasing capacity. We would have a newly paved road, which is important because this road right now, it'll get ruined in construction, and right now that's not in great shape. So those are the key recommended upgrade elements. Okay, I'm going to pass it off to Mary Beth. So
Well, I'm not going to point. Maybe I point you. So hi folks, my name is Mary Beth Bianconi, and some of you may have seen me on the last Zoom meeting, but you may not know me real well. I have been down here in Sullivan County for quite some time working, and I worked with Dave. Dave, would you believe we've been working together for 24 years? That's a long time. I have a child that's 25, which is why I can remember that. So a couple of things I want to loop back on that Dave just talked about that I think are important points to emphasize. One of the things he talked about was water quality. He talked about how the water bodies in our area, including this lake, really any water body, have an ability to absorb the things that enter that water body. Why should we care about that? That has to do with maintaining the water quality. You probably have all experienced a lake or a pond that's got that lovely green scum on it. Some of you may be familiar with things like harmful algae blooms, PABs. We keep hearing about those with drinking water sources. That's a degradation of water quality. So we're really concerned about that. Now, in our location here, we're not just worried about our local water bodies, our local lakes and rivers and streams, but we're in a larger watershed that has very substantial implications for not just the town of Liberty or Sullivan County, but really for a very substantial chunk of the eastern side of the United States, the Delaware River watershed. So it's really pretty critical. This water quality issue is pretty critical. Dave was mentioning that water bodies have a certain ability to receive wastewater that's been treated, right? So it starts out as wastewater, we treat it, so we remove a lot of the harmful things, and the water goes. But the impacts to these water bodies aren't just wastewater treatment plants, and this is a really important point for everyone to understand. Most of the impacts to our water bodies are because of the surface that I'm standing on right now, that you're on. Asphalt, concrete, buildings. So stormwater runoff contributes a very substantial loading of pollutants that are detrimental to our water supplies, to our water bodies and our lakes and our rivers and our streams. So while we could say, well then, let's not build a bigger plant because let's put in less stuff, that may not really make a difference, because if we're going to continue to develop and have less green space, have more buildings and roads and houses and parking and all of these wonderful things, they in and of themselves contribute a lot to our water bodies. So as a regulatory agency, the Delaware River Basin and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation take all of that into consideration. So it's not just about our one little community and our one little point of input, it's really about the broader picture, which means that as we think about investing money, and this is a lot of money, we have to be thinking about that future as well. That's not going to go away. We're all seeing more and more development. We're seeing more intense development. We can all remember places that you drove by all your life that were a green field that now have houses on them. So that's an important point. The other one that I want to make, because Dave was talking a little bit about how, maybe in your off season, you have enough capacity. When you hit your summer months, you're bumping up against that amount of capacity that you have. And talking about folks inside the district, people who own properties, who want to develop things. They want to build stuff. So, that creates tension in communities, regardless of whether there's a wastewater problem or not. But one of the things that's really important to understand is here in New York State, we are a property rights state. And while the town has zoning and has land use controls, folks who own properties have a right to develop them within those controls. And people who are inside sewer districts have a right to service. So we can't, and it might sound a little dicey, but we can't use a lack of wastewater treatment as a de facto zoning tool. That has been through the courts numerous times. Now, does that mean it's free and you can do whatever? No, there's a cost, and those people who benefit from the provision of the service have to pay for it in New York State. So that's why we have the Swan Lake Briscoe Road Sewer District. And that's why we're going to talk a little bit about how much is this going to cost? So $18 million, I'm sure you all got up this morning and over coffee at breakfast, you said, gee, honey, I think I'll spend $18 million today. Probably not. This is an enormous investment. The reality is that a long time ago, as Dave said, I think in 1986, someone decided that there would be a community wastewater system here. And in making that decision, they set forth a path for us that really leaves us with an obligation that we really can't get around. I cannot imagine a day when the town board is going to say, okay, we're going to rip up all the pipes, we're going to plug them all up, we're going to do away with the sewer plant, y'all get your own septic systems and we go home. That's not going to happen. So we have this obligation that people decided on a long, long time ago, and it's expensive. One of the things that struck me when I started looking at this and talking to Frank and working with Dave and Helen on this project is right now we're paying about $545,000 a year in operating and maintenance costs, and our debt service is about $130,000 a year. Normally, in a perfect world, we really like to see those at about 50% of the cost. So each would be contributing about 50% of what everybody would pay. When I look at this and I see that our operating costs are more expensive than our debt, it tells me two things. One thing it tells me is that we haven't made a lot of investments because that would be reflected in the debt service. The second thing it tells me is that this is a pretty small geography that's supporting the costs. Because it may not seem intuitive, but the costs of the joy and pleasure of having a sewer system, we might all think, well, if I flush my toilet a little bit less, I should pay a little bit less. The reality is that most of the costs of operating and maintaining the system are fixed. We have to pay for the people. We have to pay all their benefits. We have to pay to maintain everything. Whether there's one drop of water going through or a million drops of water going through, the variable costs are really small. So that O&M number, it's not unreasonable by any stretch of the imagination, but what it tells me is that we have a district that is pretty small to share the costs. So it's just something that I look at when I look at these kinds of things. Our projected O&M is going to go up. And why is it going to go up? Well, we're going to build more stuff, so we have to maintain more things. But we're also going to treat the water a lot better. And by taking more things out of the water, there's a cost associated with doing that. Dave mentioned sludge. So basically we take dirty water, we turn it into clean water, all the stuff that comes out becomes sludge and has to be dealt with in some way. That is one of the highest costs of these facilities. So it's not, again, surprising that we're looking at a projected operating maintenance cost of $700,000 a year to be shared by the users. This is going to be an expensive project because you need to meet those environmental objectives. In terms of capital, in terms of the debt service, you know, this has been discussed many times. The debt service is like your mortgage on your house, right? We're going to borrow a lot of money over a long period of time. We got to pay it back annually. We're looking at about $600,000 a year in debt service with zero interest financing. I probably, you know, beating a little bit of a dead horse, but zero interest financing is a pretty good deal. I think if we could all get that on our car loan or on our house or college loans or whatever it is you're paying for, you'd be really happy. As Dave mentioned, your zero interest financing, you have access to it as long as we advance the project along. We have to get an application for financing into the state by the end of May, and we have to close on some financing by the end of the year in order to maintain that. And as Dave says, it would be nice to think that you could just start all over again and reapply. I deal with probably 20 or 30 of these financings annually, municipalities just like this one. And I will say that the competition, as Dave said, has gone up. The amount of money that's available has gone down in real dollars. You all need look no further than the state budget. All of the money for water, wastewater, roads, bridges, all of this durable stuff that we see around us that's in the state budget for the 2021-2022 budget is the same amount of money that was allocated in 2019. So if we think about it, that's a lot less money. And that's kind of our issue, right? So we want to be able to take advantage of that financing. Now, there's some other things that we should talk about, which is grants. Grants are great. As opposed to a loan, we don't have to pay back a grant. And are there some grants that are potential for this project? Absolutely. There's a number of them, and I'll go over them in a minute, but on this slide, we do show the impact of one grant program that seems like it's very accessible for this project, which would be getting a $4.5 million grant from something called the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. That would reduce our debt service to $450,000 a year, which is a savings. Let me go to the next one. So what do people pay for today? Right now, the operation and maintenance cost divided out among all of the users is based on an average amount of water used by a home is about $736 a year. The portion of the debt that's existing is $104 for a total of $840 a year. That kind of sounds like a lot of money, but I will say that across the state and the districts that we work in, it's pretty much what we see. Generally speaking, that's what we see. We also know that we see people paying a lot more for things like internet service and televisions and phones and things like that. So we think about it in the broad scheme of household expenses. To be able to safely get rid of your wastewater, it's not unreasonable. Go to our next one. So how will sewer rates be impacted? It's a pretty big jump, being totally honest. We're looking at going from that 840 to about 1,540, 1,536 per household per year. So that's a pretty good chunk of change. There's no question about that. The effect of that grant that I just talked about, that $4.5 million grant, would reduce it to about $1,400, $1,415. So that's a good savings. It's probably still not enough. So there's more things that we need to do. Let me go to our next one. So what are we doing to try and help this situation? Well, first of all, we're going to aggressively pursue grants. Last year in 2020, due to COVID, there were no grants. No grant programs operated. The money had been appropriated in the budget, but it was left to the governor's discretion. And due to a lack of certainty about the world, essentially, no grant programs operated. I've just come from a meeting where I have learned that we should expect grant programs to run this year, and they should run as they have run in the past. So skip last year, pretend like it didn't exist, go back to prior years. So we will be aggressively pursuing grants. Water Infrastructure Improvement Act is that one I just mentioned that pays for 25% or $5 million of eligible project costs. It's a grant, no money, you don't have to pay anything back. It acts as principal forgiveness. It reduces the amount of money that has to be paid back in debt. So it has a direct impact on what you would pay as a ratepayer. Good deal. There's also some potential for us to get some public infrastructure financing through our state representatives. Here we have Aileen Gunther and Mr. Matucci. Those dollars would be wonderful to get, again, grant money, but those are a little more challenging. It's not a guaranteed thing. We will pursue those as aggressively as we can. And then we should not forget our federal partners. Folks who've been watching the news are aware that we have this, the Congress just adopted and President Biden signed something called the Rescue Act, which is supposed to be looking into the past and providing funds to municipalities. I'm sure the town is getting some money to offset the impacts of COVID on their budgets. So that's a past looking thing. The infrastructure bill that's wending its way through Congress, and my understanding is we should be watching negotiations and thinking about something being adopted perhaps towards the end of summer. I'm being told August or September. That will most certainly include money for water and sewer systems. There seems to be broad agreement in Congress that infrastructure, bridges, roads, water systems, sewer systems, and the new one, broadband, is infrastructure and deserves investment. There's some other aspects of that bill that are considered to be controversial, and we may see them go by the wayside in favor of some action, because we all know we've been hearing about this for years and it's not happened. We can remember back to 2009, in the height of the financial crisis, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. I always get it backwards. I think I did it right that time. ERA, or some of us would call it Obama bucks. That plugged millions of dollars in infrastructure into our communities, and we were able to assist many communities in securing that funding. Community, just kind of, if the past is any indicator of the future, communities that had hardship financings with the Environmental Facilities Corporation when ERA happened in 2009, as long as they jumped through all the hoops and did it really quickly, and I emphasize, really quickly, I worked a lot of weekends, we're able to get 50% forgiveness of their project costs. So one example really quickly, we were working on the City of Hudson's wastewater treatment plant. That was a $17 million project. They had hardship. They were going forward with their project. We got a phone call on a Thursday that said, if by Tuesday you can get me all this information, you can get 50% of $17 million erased from your project. So I worked all weekend and we got 50% erased. We will set you up to be prepared to take advantage of anything like that that comes along. No guarantees, but that's what we did in the past. We'll try that. We're also going to be looking at possibly changing the way that we look at future users in terms of the way that they could help fund or defray some of these costs. So if we think about it, this is one of the interesting things. We need to upgrade our treatment plant, and we're going to add a little bit of capacity so that those users in the district who have rights to that can access it. That's wise. But those users they're going to come along later. So how do we get them to help, right? How do we, remember I said O&M costs appear to be kind of high because we don't have a lot of users. O&M will always get divided by all the users. How do we get them to help? Well, we can do this on a forward-looking basis. As we have, the debt's going to be the debt, and people who are here are going to pay for that for whatever period of time until new folks come. But as new folks come on, their addition of wastewater demands are going to impact us going out in the future. They're going to take some of that capacity away. That capacity has economic value. They're also going to add more water to the system. They're going to wear all of Dave's equipment, right? They're going to generate more sludge. They're going to do all these things. So we can set up a system of charges that's fair and transparent, and that recognizes that the taxpayers of today are paying these costs, and that has this future benefit for folks in the district who are going to come in later. So we can do that, and that's something that I know the board has said that they would like to do. What other things, Dave talked about this a little bit in terms of the design of the system. Now, this is one of the questions that's come up is, how come we have to make all these decisions before we've figured all this stuff out, right? Why can't we just say, hey, Dave, go design everything and come back to us with solid answers on everything so we know everything before we have to make these decisions? Well, people higher than all of our pay grades a long time ago in New York State came up with this process that we're engaged in right now, where we have to go through this process, notify you of the general concepts and the cost, which by the way is a maximum cost, maybe less, and then we get authorized to go do all that work and sort everything out. So in doing all that work and sorting things out, we're trying to use as many existing structures as we can, right? Because they already exist, they don't cost us money. We're going to do everything we can to extend the useful life of something that's already there, because that's really cost effective rather than replacing it in whole. And then we're also going to obviously look at energy efficiency. Your old plant is a very energy efficient plant, even though it's really old. It's just the type of technology. To meet these new treatment requirements, we're going to be using more energy. So energy efficiency is going to become really, really important to reducing costs. So we'll be doing that. There's also some potential for some grants there that we will look at and work with to see if we can get them. Unfortunately, they're not big money, but anything helps, and we're willing to pursue it all. So end of our little presentation here, what are the key takeaways? So first of all, as Dave said, and I said before, your plant is at the end of its life. And unless somebody's going to say, we're going to do away with the treatment plant and the network of pipes and everybody's going to go build their own septic system, have to do something with the plant, whether you make it bigger or not. You have an opportunity to take advantage of zero interest financing. I cannot tell you with any degree of confidence that if you said, no, thank you, we want to regroup and start all over again, that you would be able to access that financing. I already have a number of communities that are in the hopper that will take advantage of that financing. They're in a different position than you are in terms of their environmental impacts. So they will definitely be able to take advantage of it. I can tell them with great confidence. For you, you're right now, as Dave said, if we were to reapply in last year, given the competitiveness, we would not be getting zero interest financing. We would be getting subsidized financing or market rate financing. So this is really important. Take advantage of this. We need to make these investments to just continue the plant's operation and also to meet the obligations. Again, back in 1986, someone created this district. There's an obligation to these users, to these property owners, so that needs to occur. And we also have our commitment to try and reduce costs as much as possible. What's our timeline? Here we are at our public hearing. We have a deadline for you to submit written comments by the 27th, and I believe you're submitting them to the supervisor, Supervisor DeMayo at townofliberty.org. I almost remembered. Town board will need to regroup on May 5th, and I'm gonna look at my version because I can't read that one. Or May 3rd, I'm sorry. Okay. Old eyes. May 3rd, review the public hearing comments. We'll also be looking at the seeker process again. That's another area of these projects that I get very much involved in. You already did a seeker process on a project for this wastewater treatment plant. We will be looking at those findings, evaluating if there's something different, new, or substantial that we need to cover. We will cover it if it's necessary. If everything was previously identified in terms of potential impacts, we'll be going through that process again. And then one of the important steps to get to a financing application is the adoption of a bond resolution. Just so everybody knows, you might wonder, how come the town can't just go get zero interest financing on its own? And why is it adopting a bond resolution if the state's going to give you the money anyway? Well, the way this works is the town's bond resolution, actually, normally if you bought a snowplow, you would do a bond resolution, you go to 3 or 4 local banks, say, I need $200,000 for a snowplow, you figure out who gives you the best interest rate, and you give them the bond, and they give you the money, right? That's how it works. You sell the bond. For this process, the bond is being sold to the state, and the state is able to extend that zero interest financing. So we do need that bond resolution adopted. And then we have a bunch of paperwork that we have to put together so that by the end of the month, we have that application in place at the state and we can continue to secure your zero interest financing. That application does go along with an engineering report that will be very detailed and extensive, and that document will be made public so people can review that engineering report as it's out there. We then, as I just said, as far as I know, grants are going to operate this year. Traditionally, they are announced in May or June. They are due in July or August, depending on the program. And then the governor likes to make announcements around Christmas time, so we all have a little bit of drama to wait until then. My understanding is it will run on that schedule. And then we need to, get working on designing these improvements, and that will also answer a lot of these questions folks have. That process for us is very iterative. We work with the town, we work with the town's operators, go back and forth a lot, and certainly I know, Dave will be here. We do public presentations to describe what we're doing and the decisions we're making and the financial implications of those. So with that, I think we're done with our presentation and ready for questions.
Anyone with any questions here? Nick, how many do we have on Zoom?
I'm going to find out right now.
Go ahead, Mike.
I stay here, Frank. Welcome to the microphone.
Can everybody hear Michael? Wherever you feel comfortable.
Okay, I'll speak from here. I had a question on, thank you for the presentation. I had a question on page 4, because we're going to increase the capacity of the plant by 195,000 gallons per day. So how many new homes will that increasing capacity permit to be built?
The number of units vary by the type of development.
estimates that we provided were based on existing developments that were in planning. There's no one number that says you're gonna be able to have 75 houses. We've got some estimates for that. At this point, I can't give you a definitive number. So we can say that.
Okay, well, in your previous presentation, you said 205 gallons per day is the figure that you use as an average for a household. So if we divide 195,000 by that amount, we get just under 1,000 new homes. Is that correct?
If you say that's correct.
Well, not if I say it's correct, if the math is correct.
I'm not sure what we presented or what we said in the last presentation.
Okay, well, that's not good news for the engineer.
Certainly estimates, so.
But just so everyone else is clear, the approximate number of houses, depending on what kind of homes are built, that will be made possible by this proposal is just under 1,000. So you have to think in your mind of 1,000 extra houses in Swan Lake as we know it, and what that would do to the environment. And finally, in my question, my assumption is that you believe that adding 900 or 1,000 new homes in a district as small as Swan Lake will have no adverse environmental impact. Is that correct?
So let me address that. So the project at hand is a wastewater treatment plant project. The construction of homes, presumably, depending on how your zoning law is set up, goes through the planning board. So if someone was to come in and do a real property subdivision or propose multifamily housing or an apartment, that would go before your planning board. Your planning board will, I believe, have to conduct seeker on that project.
Right.
One of the things that they will have to do in seeker is say what's going to happen to parking, water supply, sewer, all of those kinds of things, which will be evaluated for each project when they come. One of the things about seeker that I know for a fact is it is not a speculative process. You have to do seeker on real things. You can't guess. So right now, today, we can't guess at what those, just like we can't say how many houses there will be. What if someone comes and says, I want to build a theater? Well, that's going to use water, but it's not equal to a house, right? So we can't speculate. When we look at environmental impacts for a wastewater project, that's what we're looking for is the project. You can't speculate about other development in other places or what that would be or what the environmental impacts of those projects would be. They happen when they're proposed at that time as part of the seeker process through the town planning board or the zoning board or whatever's appropriate.
Thanks. But you do accept that there will be a major expansion of, as you say, all the things that will contribute to pollution and so on, water runoff, as a result of this proposal?
I do not, because
Thank you.
I have witnessed many, many, many communities that have taken the build it and they will come scenario, and years later, nobody came. Now I have other communities where they have said, gee, we really don't want any development, and they all come. The presence of wastewater alone does not equal development. There is nothing that you can find for me, no study, nothing that is verified. What does generate development is zoning and local land use controls. So I worked in many communities that have water and sewer infrastructure where the zoning does not permit intense development. And as a result, there is no intense development because it is not permitted by the land use laws. So sewer in and of itself does not drive development. It certainly facilitates it because if you had to build a septic system everywhere, first of all, it wouldn't be very good for the environment, but it does permit it. But the whole analysis, my understanding, is based on the zoning that exists in the district right now. If that zoning is changed in the future to something else, that would change the development potential.
Yes.
Yeah, Matt, yes, first of all, so this is the public hearing or the hearing?
It's just questions.
Correct. Okay, so first of all, thanks for holding it here, beautiful weather. Let me ask you a question. There was the numbers that, right, it will cost $800 and $1,500 and something dollars or $1,400 with the grant. Is there a breakdown? From my understanding, most of the costs, or approximately 10 or 12 million, is just to get fix the plant, to get it in compliance with certain DEC requirements that either are in existing conditions now, or that we know the plant needs the development without adding 1 gallon. Do you have a breakdown on per user, like from the jump? We're going from 840 to 1550. A large chunk of that would have to cost, I believe, right, even without adding 1 gallon of capacity. So do you have a breakdown that I think the public would be should know that, let's say from the $700 or something that's being added, what amount would anyways need to be added without adding 1 gallon, and what amount gets added with adding 1 gallon of, or whatever, the 195,000 gallons of capacity? Do you have an answer?
It's a good question, but I don't have the answer. You have the answer, you could offer those, right?
Right.
But it's something.
But from the $80 million, how many millions would it cost just to fix the plant?
The estimate just to repair the plant as it is today, without adding any capacity or any new treatment, is probably in the $10 to $12 million range.
So it's fair to say that 55 or 60% of the additional cost would cost anyways, and whatever is the other 45 or 40% from the addition is just added capacity. Okay, that makes sense. One more question I want to ask. I know there are, as you mentioned, technically everybody that owns property is allowed to make their own septic tank. I mean, a sewer system if they want, just like Leisure Lane or Kelly Bridge Road, correct?
That's not actually allowed. I was using it as if they dissolve the district and said no more sewers, your wastewater has to go someplace, right? But I do not believe your law requires that you connect to the utilize a sewer system. You're not permitted within the district. And that's typical, just so everybody knows. That's a regular.
Now,
I want to take that a little bit farther, like 2 aspects. Number one, is the gallonage at 686,000, is that enough for growth? It allows some growth, and I know growth is such a topic here, but what a lot of people don't understand is anybody here could do a development, and if that sewer plant can't handle us, they can put up their own treatment facility. It can be right next to your house. Villaroma, shining example. Southwoods housing development. They have their own treatment plants, because if you're denied because you can't take that capacity, that is an avenue that they can take. I would rather have a sewer treatment plant run by these gentlemen here than have one next door that's not near as secure or as maintained as they would take one. So my question then, to back up a little bit, is this 686 enough for future growth? We all look at things and say, well, if we zone and don't allow future growth, how will that work? Well, what are we trying to do? Zone out growth? I'm the chairman of the Board of Assessment Review here, and I'll tell you what, we don't need to zone out any more growth around here. We need to build tax base up. We have to do something to pick up our income, and that only comes with building something. And a lot of people here will say, I like the way it was. I've had this discussion with a few people. Oh, the way it was when? 25 years ago, when we had 3 lumber yards in town of Liberty, and now we have 0? Or 30 years ago, when we had 4 of them? So what direction are we going? Do we want it the way it was? We had hotels that used a lot more water than some of these houses. We don't have any of them anymore. So do we have to upgrade? Yes, I've been over to the sewer treatment plant. It needs upgrading. I can't believe what they do with what they have there, but they do. And I just want, is that enough? I looked at that chart and I looked at and listened to you talk about towels and things that get mess up a sewer system that happens in all sewer plants. And I looked at that and say, what on that chart makes the difference between 686 and 1 million, let's say? What parts of those? Is it how many of those nozzles that are pushing air? Is it the drainage area? Is it the fuel beds? Or is it everything put together? Is everything a percentage? Or are there some items that would be the same whether it's 686 or 1 million? just as a question that I had.
It's a good question because there's common costs in there that would be whether it's 700,000 or $1 million, like the size of your head pumps, right? Your mechanical screens. It's not like a pump where you're going to go from 5 horsepower to 15 horsepower, right? Those sizes of those units would be the same. That building would be the same for that. The size of your force main would be the same. Your sludge processing equipment would be nearly the same. So the cost to go from say 700,000 to $1 million is incremental. There's a base cost of some of these key components. It could be like a new headworks, like sludge dewatering. So and I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but there's a base cost which just includes what you've got to pay to just fix up what's there now, no capacity. And then to add new processes, there's another choke, right? And then to make that process either 700,000 or $1 million, there's an incremental difference in there that's not very large. So, you know, in the end, the difference between a 1 million gallon a day plant and a $686,000 plant, we're saying is about $2 million, which isn't a lot, right? Because what you need are these key components. Understanding if you're, say, 12 million just to fix your plant, to build new headworks, to build new sludge dewatering, and you have to build some building for your advanced waste treatment. Those are kind of fixed costs, you know, that are within the realm. You're not going from 700,000 to 1.5 million or 2 million. Right? You know, there's sort of close to the same number to get to the larger capacity.
Thank you. That answers that question.
Yeah. And they're not, you know, it's not linear in other words. You know, it's incremental, it's really small, right?
At this flow level, right? Because you're not talking about tens of millions of gallons a day. The size of your facility is fairly small relative to say a 3 or 5 million gallon a day. So the incremental difference between 700 and 800 and 900 is not great.
But it's bad when it's set up for 686 and you bring in a million. So my question is, if it's so minor and so little change needed, I mean, why are we at 686 and not a million? I mean, we all know we need this facility. We all know we need it bad. What's over there is old and needs to be upgraded. And I just want, is that something that down the road is just as easy to upgrade if in case the town decides to take on outside users and take the impact fees that offset the cost of it, which would be beneficial to the town? Or do you look at it and say, well, we don't need to go any further because we don't see the growth? I think the growth should be sitting there at its threshold right now. I think we see that. That's why one of the reasons we're here.
I think that's part of the design analysis. Is there a way to, for instance, for some of your process tankage in your advanced waste treatment, there's things that go into those tanks and the size of, say, the blowers.
I don't know if your voice is being picked up on this in the Zoom. You can get closer to the mic.
But using, it's part of the design that would be looking at what's the incremental cost to allow that plant to be upgraded in the future. Understanding that some of those elements, like the headworks, like the force main up the hill, maybe you have to add another influent pump, right? Instead of, but the force main size could be the same. The size of your building to house your advanced waste treatment equipment. Maybe you leave enough room for a 4th blower, right? And you leave an area for some air piping that would do that. And you make your tank big enough where you accommodate that. Those are some of the design intricacies that the board would have to decide on. Right now, the thought process is we're building, the 18 million means we're building basically to this right now. We're estimating that to be that static capacity. And maybe there's a way to build in some things that allow it to go larger in the future.
Another point we should make is that in 1986, when this plant was built, there were, what, Dave, half a dozen technologies that they had a tendency to treat, the concept was we were treating space rather than time. So they take up a lot of room, those kinds of things. This technologies that Dave's talking about, this advanced waste technology, they didn't even exist They did not exist. They take up a lot less room, they're a lot more flexible in terms of the way they get implemented. So there's nothing that says that in 20 years, when you're looking at bumping against that capacity, that there won't be some new magical thing come along, because we're all, engineers, we're very innovative.
And a new magical cost of over $2 million, is what I'm saying.
Well, that is something you always have to think about, right? So this is one of those questions, and the way that I say it is, so my house pre-pandemic was the place where my family, we had Thanksgiving, right? So I would have 38 people at my house. I don't build a bigger house for Thanksgiving, but do I rearrange things and do I have a big enough house in general? Yeah, so this is one of those you're balancing, right? You're trying to decide what is that balance. I think the idea is that 686, right? There's two sides to that. One is it does accommodate some additional growth that is either discussed, planned, or likely given the configuration of the district and the land use pattern. We have to take that in consideration. The other thing is there's a technical side of this. There's just there's a limitation. That 686 number comes from technical analysis, and it may be refined. One of the things that we have to do in part of this process, and we didn't talk about it, but I think it's been talked about in the past, is we have to apply for a new permit. So when we apply for that new permit, we will have some more details on numbers and flows and those kinds of things. But conceptually, this is intended to accommodate some foreseeable growth that appears based on the land use pattern, the zoning, the configuration of lots, those kinds of things that may occur within the district.
Yep, I have a question. It piggybacks on Alan and the other gentleman with respect to finances. So first of all, I'd like to know at what point we get a line item budget for this project. I'm having all kinds of deja vu all over again experiences from when I stood here on August 31st. So I would like a definitive answer as to when do we get a line item budget for this project?
We're preparing the engineering report as part of the application. We've also provided the board with a breakdown of costs for the major components. That's been with the board for several weeks to a month now.
And when is that being offered to the taxpayers? I'm asking you because you seem to run the board.
Well, certainly it'll be, so whether it's been out there or not, but it will be in the engineering report. The engineering report will be submitted to the state before May 31st. So I would say within the next, 3 weeks?
Okay, so 3 weeks from today, which is April 20th.
Well,
I'm asking, I'm trying to get.
Okay, then put May 31st on your date.
That's too late.
Well, so that, because this is a process where we have to work with the board, we have to present the board with this material, they have to review it. Once they've done that, then it becomes a public document, but it certainly would be no later than that, because that's when the application for financing happens.
So that means that we can do a freedom of information request to see what the budget looks like now, since we're going to be paying for it.
I believe it was already in one of the packets.
I think it was, but if not, I'll get it. I believe it was in one of the packets.
Okay. So that's my first question. My second question, going back to August 31st of last year, was as of today, we have not seen anything other than one sentence that perhaps trucks will come and take the excess. When I asked very specifically, what are the short-term plans? Because this project isn't going online until 2024. Am I correct or am I mistaken?
There was, again, the board can chime in, there was discussion.
I'm asking you because you seem to run the board.
I would direct your question.
That's not true. Stop.
I'm not going to hear that again.
This is not here. We're not here to be confrontational. We're here to answer questions, please.
Well, I wish you had answered questions
Well, we
since
are.
last August.
We are, and I believe that the question that you had before with regards to the line items was in a board packet, but if it wasn't, I will be sure to get you a copy.
I appreciate
The
that.
board
Frank.
has taken a look at it.
Okay, and my third question has to do, I'm sorry if I'm a little bit, confrontational, but I can't tell you the number of times that we've asked for stuff. And, you know, here we are since last August, and we had to push and push and push to get responses. So to me, the finances are interlinked with environmental concerns. So that's part of the reason why, even though the usage has decreased, and I accept the fact that Alan Werlau does not live in the Swan Lake taxing district, you know, it's decreased by 1/3, but the cost was not. So whether it's a 1% loan, a 0% loan, or whatever that percent loan is, we still have to pay back the principal. Whether we have a 1% credit card or a 0% credit card, we still have to pay for what we charge on it. And that's why my concern is that we have to pay the principal, which is a very heavy toll on the hamlet, the size of Swan Lake, which the district is 1.5 miles, according to your maps. That's why I'm asking for these budgets. And I think I'm entitled to it.
Absolutely.
I think every taxpayer is.
Understood.
So number 2 is, given the enormity of the project, and we're starting to get more and more details of it, I find it very difficult to be able to say on a secret review that there's not going to be any negative impact on the footprint of the plant itself when you're increasing the impermeable surfaces to the extent that you are. So that's one of the issues that we've had all along, was to be able to, you know, at least face the facts that there will be negative impacts because of the expansion of the footprint of the sewage treatment plant. So I think my 3 minutes are up, and I apologize if I sounded confrontational to you, Frank, but these are questions that we've been asking for a very long time.
I believe the answers are there. If that's okay. Another question, Nancy, and then.
Can you be a little more specific about what we're doing to, about generating revenue via increasing the allocation for charges for hookups? And I know you've been looking into this for quite some time, Frank, but is there going to be a date or a point when we have specific numbers? Because I know even with building fees, I think we get, pretty sure it's $300 for a 3,000 square foot home. And the houses that are going up seem very large. And compared to other districts, it seems that our fees are very low. And I know that our fees are very low as far as hookups for sewer system is concerned. So it says we're actively considering. But I would like more information about when can we expect something to be on the books as far as this is concerned.
Yeah, I can't give you an exact date.
No.
We are looking into it. I'd like to think that sometime, you know, end of May, early June. If we're looking right now, I think 2 meetings ago, if I'm not mistaken, we were taking a look at Fallsburg's fee structure. I shared with, Mary Beth and Mary Beth shared some information with me. There's a lot of legalities involved. So I know Kenny's looking at Fallsburg's also. So we need to take a look at the legalities and then be able to put a number to it. So I don't really have an answer for you, but I'd like to think that within the next month or 2, we would be able to pin those down. Because there are, you know, potential, you know, other developers coming into play that are going to be before the planning board, and we would like those in place, you know, so that then they can pay their fair share. I think that's where we're at.
And when you say contributions from developers, what on page 10, what does that mean? You're going to ask developers to make contributions?
Or if they want to offer.
I just think we need to get on.
Yeah, well, we are.
Okay.
Okay. Abe, did you?
Yeah. Hi, Abe Ruffman. So my question is, you said there is a certain amount of developments that are in the district right now, but you said, like Joel said, that you can't really have a home package plan, right?
So I think we should clarify that. So my understanding, because I didn't look at your law, but most cases, if you are in a sewer district, you cannot build your own sewer system. You have to connect to the public sewer. That is the case here.
So is the town obligated by law to give those people sewer?
Yes, that's
It
the
has nothing
issue.
to do with zoning,
That's
right?
the issue. They are.
No, they're not.
So
If
basically,
you
it has
are
nothing
within
to
the
do with the zoning.
district.
So why are we talking about development here? It's about budget, it's about money, that's a legitimate concern. But if the town is obligated by the zoning to give some people permits, so, you know, the whole discussion should be about the money revenue that we're getting, not about the development.
So when this district was formed back in the 1980s sometime, it was formed under town law Article 12. Could have been Article 12 plain Jane or Article 12A. Article 12 is that there was a petition of property owners to create a sewer district. Article 12A is that the town board would have done this on their own action. In general, the process is the same. A map plan and report would be created, just like the one that's been created for this proceeding, that outlines in general, what's the plan, why are we solving the problem, what's the plan of improvement, who's gonna pay for it, how much are they gonna pay, those kinds of things. There would have been a public hearing. After the public hearing, the town board has to make an order. They have to say something about the proceeding. So in making that order, they have to say, it's interesting, it's an affirmative order. They have to say that they've reviewed it, that it's in the public's interest to do this because we're creating a taxing jurisdiction is what we're really doing, and we're providing a service. It's in the public's interest to do so, that every property that is benefited is inside the district and every property that is not benefited is outside the district. So they're making an assessment that says that here's the boundary, it's a geography, everybody inside is benefited. New York State, that becomes an extremely important statement to make because for special improvement districts like a sewer district or a water district or a lighting district, or there's many different kinds, those who are benefited pay for the improvements. So by making that affirmative decision a long time ago, and if the district was ever expanded, the same process was done, everybody who's inside that boundary is benefited and therefore pays the capital costs. That action says that then this district has to provide them with service. Now, does that mean they get to come and demand and say, you gotta do it for free? No, that's not the case at all. But if you are inside the taxing jurisdiction, you have a right to service. This is no different than a school district. If you are inside a school district, you have the right to put your kids in that school. You pay school taxes, in they go, and it's no different. So there is an obligation. Now, it's within reason and it's within the zoning and the other controls, and that's why I bring up zoning, because zoning does guide the intensity of development. But there is an obligation that has been created. There is not an obligation for properties that are outside the district. That's on a contractual basis or applications to expand those kinds of things. But there is an obligation, so your point is well taken.
So an empty property is paying now a certain amount for the sewer as well?
They're paying for debt service.
So basically, they're paying into the system that so basically by law, they have to be able to, to hook up their property into the system.
Right, they're considered, right, so the fact that they have access to public sewer means that they are improved, their property is considered improved. So it would be just like if you own a parcel out here on a town road, you pay town highway tax. You may not ever have a car that comes in and out or does, but your property is considered improved. It is from a real property perspective. So yes, as long as all the other rules and regulations and whatever else get followed, that connection is not only, so if you want to build something, you cannot put a septic system in, you have to connect to the sewer system.
Same as a school tax.
Correct.
Even if you don't send the kids to school.
You still have to pay it.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay, does anyone on, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm on Zoom. Can you hear me?
1 second.
Bill, we have one more person here, and then
Okay.
I'll give you.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question. I'm not a little bit of numbers guy. When I saw your numbers, I was a little bit off, so maybe you can explain to me. I was looking at the numbers and the way it was explained that you need to have a $12 million upgrade even if you don't add more water. And I understand that by adding $2 million to the $18 million, it can be doubled to 1 million gallons. So if you look at the numbers, by adding capacity for 140% what we have now, with only having a cost of 60%, wouldn't that make much more sense to cover that gap?
Yeah, you
And
know,
especially if you take out of district users, which they pay even more, so that means the revenue can be 250%, yet the cost is only 60%.
yeah, so this is really a question for the board, but just so
Oh, is
everybody
that numbers
understands.
accurate? That's okay.
Yeah, just so everybody understands, it is not linear. As we add gallons, the cost does not go up on a linear basis because you already have the tank. Is the tank maybe a foot deeper? Is the tank maybe a foot wider? You're already building the tank. So it's not linear, it's incremental as you get more gallons. And just for a little perspective, just so folks know, I mean, I know we were talking about, we have a 400-ish thousand gallon a day plant today. We're looking at going to an almost 700,000 gallon a day plant. There's been discussions about 1 million. You know, Dave, not so much, but in my world, I routinely deal with plants. I have a 6 million gallon a day plant. I have a plant that's 43 million gallons a day. I have one that's 58 million gallons a day. These are relatively small plants, but here's the problem, right? So in my giant plants, right, my huge mega plants where it's, 46 million gallons a day, the users are paying $170 a year for everything. But why? Because there's 58,000 of them. 58,000 are paying the cost, right? So that's part of what gets complex about this, right? The cost to create larger treatment is not linear, it's incremental. And to some degree, depending on site constraints and technology and some other things, right, that we have to take into environmental impacts that we have to take into consideration, it goes up a little tiny bit as we get bigger and bigger, right? But the bigger factor is who's paying on the other side, right? Because honestly, that cost of that concrete does not care. If there's 300 people paying for it or 300,000 people paying for it, that cubic yard of concrete costs exactly the same thing. That's the problem that we have, right? I started this off by saying a long time ago, folks decided there would be public sewers here. We are now kind of dealing with that, the implications of that. And to the gentleman's point about increasing economic activity will give more people to pay the costs. In terms of decisions about how big and how much, that's what these folks are.
I think to address the issue for the people that it's going to cost so much more, the board should be looking into in numbers. And I think looking at the numbers, going to a million gallon plant would only decrease the number from the numbers right now.
Okay, well, the board did look at that, okay, so we've looked at multiple options. And after discussions and public hearing, the previous public hearing, there were concerns about too much growth. And one of the key issues, I believe, with the million gallon plant, 90 some odd thousand gallons was considered for out of district users. So by knocking them out, that keeps it a little bit, the development a little bit more under control. The other thing was, another figure that was in there, and I don't recall the numbers, but was, complete build out of what was analyzed to be good developable land. So we said, well, rather than go there, let's take a look and see what developers are out there and proposing to do actual development. We've had developers come in, propose 60 units here, 20 units there, some single units, 4 units, whatever. So, so we decided that's going to be the breaking point. So, it's a compromise.
No, I understand.
It's a compromise, and I understand what you're saying about the cost. I do understand what you're saying is the cost, but we have, right now, we're just looking at what we believe will be the development that's coming down there. Not, something that we haven't heard about or don't know about. And, you know, we have to see when the engineering's done, is this plant expandable? If it comes at some point down the road that we want to expand it again, using the same equipment. And, you know, that's part of this whole process, especially through the design process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bill, did you have a question?
Do you hear me?
Yep, we got you, Bill.
We got it.
Okay. Is this the public comment period or question period?
Question, if you don't, Bill, if you don't have a question, or if nobody that's on Zoom has a question, we can go to the public comment period. Somebody else have a question?
There's, yep.
Okay, mine is for the public comment period,
All right.
so,
We'll get back to you.
okay.
Cindy, do you have a question?
I've had quite a few questions. Thank you for taking my questions. Frank, number one, I talked to you the last time we spoke on Zoom, and I asked you questions that you were to get back to me about the engineer and the person that will be signing permits and all of that, and you never got back to me.
Cindy,
I've asked this question now. This is my fourth time of asking the question of how much we have been paying through our taxes already, the engineers, to be signing permits because we don't have the personnel to do and sign permits currently now for the 265,000. And now we're talking about after 500,000, a special a special person has to be hired to actually sign those permits, and how much we're paying as taxpayers to the engineers so far, and what's our future paying to them if we don't hire someone.
okay.
That's my first question.
I'm gonna let Dave answer that because I believe the numbers for that management, if you will, is included in the O&M estimate. Am I correct?
Yeah, correct.
And so really quick,
So how does that break down then? I don't see, I mean, are we going to hire someone to actually come in and do and be the person, you know, personnel that we hire as a town to run the plant, or are we going to pay exorbitant taxes to engineers because they charge a lot more than what would cost? I don't see the breakdown of which is it going to be, an engineer signing permits, or are we going to actually have a personnel hired through the district?
What's included in the budget right now, Cindy, is to have a higher level operator in there for 30 days a quarter, which is what's required by DEC. And so that would provide the oversight to the existing certified operators. So you're not talking about a full-time person. You're not talking about an engineer, unless that person is an engineer that's also a 3A operator that the board would choose to hire.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but existing personnel at the plant would, I believe there's a 1-year requirement to work in this type of plant. But in the interim, during that 1-year period, they will be getting training to
Exactly.
get the requirements after a year.
Yep, understood.
So
That's how it's typically done.
It's a temporary cost.
So does that mean that we lose the personnel out of our district while they go to, say, let's say, Middletown or Peekskill, who has that capacity of a facility? Do we now have to hire another person to come in and replace that personnel that's going for a year to get their to be able to license and sign the permit?
No, in essence, our understanding is that the existing staff would work under the direction of a higher level of certified operator that would be there for 30 hours a quarter, 30, whatever the regulation is. I don't have it right on the tip of my tongue. That person is temporarily hired by the town for the duration that's required for the operators to get the requisite experience to operate the new plant and to secure the adequate training to go to the next level. That's typically how it's done.
So the
Okay.
cost
Now,
It's
Also,
and your existing operators will run your plant.
okay. Now, my other question is that when I heard you talking about current people and current projects that have already been approved by the planning board, I have read all the planning board meetings and minutes. Number one, the planning board is not in compliance with their minutes and their meetings to be able to even see what has been approved. I looked at planning board minutes as far as what has come before the planning board, and I don't see any real big projects that are been pre-approved. So when you're talking about the pre-approved projects, what are they and where are they?
I'm gonna answer this to the best that I can, Cindy, and maybe somebody can back me up, but I believe some of those projects that were pre-approved are already being built. And I believe they're in Swan Manor, it might include Kai Villas, I'm not sure, and Green Hills. I think those are the big three, am I correct? Yeah. And Green
Well,
Hills-
obviously the engineer.
Years ago, and Green Hill was granted a permit years ago, and they renew their permits, I believe, annually. I think that's in Swan, every 2 years.
Yes, I remember going to the planning boards when they were given their permits or their approval. But one of the problems with the other side of this, where they've already built, on the other side that hasn't been built yet, was that the planning board required them to reconstruct their exit out that I don't see has ever been done because it wasn't safe.
Well, it may not have been, and it may be at a future planning board meeting, but the development across the street can't be built because we don't have the sewer capacity. So,
right, Green Hills is actually out of our sewer district, if I'm right. They're trying to get into our sewer district.
Believe so.
Am I correct?
I don't believe so, but I'd have to check.
Because when looking at your 1.5 mile, Green Hills was, I believe, outside the sewer district. So there's someone, they're one of the people that are asking to come in to use our district.
I don't believe that's the case, Cindy, because I believe they redesigned the project, and I'd have to go look to be within the sewer district. I do recall looking at some plans. I don't know when that was, but I'd have to go look. I'd have to take a look.
Okay, my other concern and question is that when you go to redo the seeker, which you have to do, because now your value of how much in gallons is going up, my question is when they go to build this size of a facility, that how it doesn't trigger a negative impact, because number one, right now we're saying, okay, we're going to build this facility that will, allow all these people to build whatever they want to build and whatever, but our structure and our roads and everything else that is here is rural, can't accommodate all of this new generation of people. As far as, so how is that not a neg finding?
So for seeker, the seeker for this project will be for the wastewater treatment plant project itself. Every one of these developments, either in the past or the ones that will come in or new building, will have seeker done on an individual basis, because we have no way of knowing today or speculating where those developments will be, how will they be built, how much impervious surface will they have, all of those things. So the seeker that's done today is for this project. And then every project that comes in that requires seeker in the future will have a seeker review done to evaluate its individual impacts.
Okay, and here's my question though, is that if that's true, then building and going ahead and building a facility and says they will come, okay, we can't substantiate the people that are coming into the district because of all of our roads and all of our, you know, infrastructure and things that aren't equipped right now to handle this kind of influx of people. But then they're going to come anyway, and you're saying that we have to depend on the fact that the planning board is going to say, oh, wait a minute, you know, we don't have the, you know, the roads or, you know, traffic and what that impact will do to the district, and it being a rural, you know, district, that it's going to change. This actual project is going to change our standing as far as rural, because we're now saying it's okay to build this and let them all come.
So the zoning controls what gets built where and at what scale, and that has nothing to do with the wastewater treatment plant. And every project, the planning board is required by the state law to do seeker on every project. And they're required, there's this thing called a hard look that they're required to do for every project. So they have to evaluate the impacts on land, air, water, roads, community character, all of those things for every project that comes before the planning board. That's their job.
Well, yes, and in past references to issues that have come before the zoning and the planning board, they haven't done their job because they've allowed things to happen that should not have happened. And then we have to go back again and then say, okay, you know, it wasn't correct. Now, my other question is, when you all brought up original figures, that the average house was assessed value at $49,000, I believe. And you said that the amount of money that it would raise, I believe, was $628. Now, what about the people who have assessed values of a whole lot more than $49,000? And you're only saying that it's going to go up maybe, you know, $100 and something a year, or will it be a month? Because those of us who are on income that's, you know, doesn't, you know, I'm on Social Security disability, I don't get any more income. So if you're looking at a $49,000 valuation, and that's according to your own stats, that if my valuation is double that, that means I am now going to be paying another $1,200 a year to have this new sewer system that doesn't benefit me, and also that I can't afford to pay for. So how is that fair to those who live here in the district right now? How is that fair to us, that we're now going to take on the burden of this and not be able to stay in our homes?
So the cost is not associated with assessed value. It's based on the use of the system. It's based on the amount of water that's used by the average house. So it's not relevant. The assessed value of the properties is not relevant.
Okay, well, what about the people that are only here 3 months out of the year, and how much water they use versus people who live here that are a very small percentage of the 1.5 miles of residents who live here that live here year round? So we're going to then be even more impacted by, if you don't go by your original assessed house value, that by how much, you know, we use. We're here year round, and we're going to get slammed as far as how much more a year that we're going to pay. How is that going to be offset for those of us who actually do live here?
I don't know that it will. I mean, you pay for usage. However much goes through that meter is what you pay for.
Yes, but that's fine, Frank. But
Cindy, let me answer. Whether you're here 3 months or whether you're here the full year, And we don't know that people that are here for 3 months now aren't gonna be here for the full year next year. I mean, you pay for the usage, that's. There's nothing.
Right, but we're now going to offset the people who only wanna, if you bring in and you go ahead and you build this facility, okay? And we're here being the only taxpayers right now because we're, some things are being built. We don't know what's coming. We're going to be responsible, like Cora said, to pay back that money. Regardless of who comes into the district, at this point, we're still, bottom line, going to see our increase be to such a point that we can't afford to even stay where we live.
But any new users that come in will be paying too. So any new users that come in will help. That's where the offset comes. New users that come in pay into the system.
Well, we don't know that they're going to pay into the system, but we're now going to be holding that load on our shoulders until they do. And I think that's where our problems are.
Well, and we went through the areas that we're gonna look for additional funding. We're gonna look for grants. We're gonna look for some fee structure for new development, for new building. We're gonna look at every avenue. I mean, Cindy, we're not taking this lightly. We're really trying to get the cost of this down. But we need a project, and that's what we're here to identify the project, so that when we go for this funding, we have a project to get the grants.
It's just going to be an incredible burden to those of us who live here right now before, because we're going to be assuming this debt.
Okay. Anybody else with a question out there? Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? Bill, I know you wanted to comment for public comment. We're gonna open it up for public comment now. So we'll start with you, Bill. Hi, Bill? Is he there?
He's there. Bill, you're up for public comment.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say that the problem is the usage of the project. Developers come, developers go. It's a hot market now, so people are touting. Just look at one you just mentioned up on the hill. How many years they've been renewing the permits? We in Swan Lake are a small community, and we are living in Liberty, which is one of the highest tax bases in New York State. We have no true economic development, and we're just talking about what if we develop, and what if we this, and what if we that. Nobody has been against the development that's scheduled. Nobody has been against. It's the capacity of how big we're going to make this plant. And in all honesty, I resent some of the remarks that are coming from Delaware Engineering. They are paid people that are making millions of dollars off of this project, and the flipness of saying things like, oh, we're paying for extra internet and things go up. We're burdened here in Sullivan County. We have the unhealthiest county now again besides the Bronx. Our stats are terrible. Our economic development is terrible throughout the county. It took so many years to get a Marshalls into the town of Thompson. We don't see anything like that coming into Liberty. And yeah, I'm very glad people are coming and paying the school tax. I'm paying a lot of money in taxes, and so are the people that aren't utilizing school services and everything. But let's look at the infrastructure of Liberty. Are we going to apply for infrastructure grants so we can redo all our roads and concern about Stanton Corner and other areas there? It's very nice for people to come use the Park Avenue, New York words and to talk about this statistic and that statistic and what has to be done. But we have to look at reality. We always said compromise, and we always said, look, Everyone's invited to come up. Why did we come up? Why did people move here to Sullivan County? Because of the rural area, because it's not urbanized, it's not tall buildings. Soon we'll be saying, let's build high skyscrapers everywhere. And that's not what we're having. We're talking about cookie cutter houses that are on top of each other, that have a capacity of a lot of people there. Now we're talking about sewerage and we're talking about things getting stuck in the pipes, and we have to hear about the Delaware water gap and all of this nonsense. We don't have to hear about any of that. People want to come here. The town is growing. Everyone should be welcome here. But let's not start saying that we're going to build this because maybe certain contractors want to hire people and make money so they could retire and move out of Sullivan County. Let's talk about economic development in Sullivan County and about our tax situation, and talk about what we can do in the area here. So I am very glad that the board has finally listened and compromised and not doing that. But you know, there's other engineer companies. A Delaware engineer just wants to make money off of this. And the way they're talking is just, I'm just flawed. I'm just listening to this, driving in my car, listening to what I'm hearing. And I think it's shameful and disgusting. So let everyone have developers that have plans be able to utilize the sewer system, go with the compromise, but also look at the impact of what it's doing to the burden of the taxes of current taxpayers. That's what we're saying. We're paying a lot of money and getting very little of services. So I implore you, look in other areas as well to increase our tax base. We can't go on what if that in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years from now, a development's going to pop up and people are going to start paying taxes here. That's not how we could only look at it. We have to look at the crisis we're in right now. So in 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you want to expand it again? Expand it again. God bless. But let's look at the area and to compromise, and that's what you're doing now. But don't listen to stories about dynamic. What if we get this grant and we're going to apply for that, and Aileen Gunther and Mike Martucci's going to do all wonders for us and get us so much money. Let's talk about reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Is there anybody else on Zoom that would like to address have comments for this public participation? Anyone? Next.
Anyone else for public comment? I believe Cindy has her hand up. Okay, Cindy.
Okay, I would like to ask that the public comment that I made back in August and that I resent again, which now you've had twice and it hasn't shown up in any of the minutes, be resubmitted and added to as my public comment for the current public comment period.
Okay, Cindy, I'll address that. When you sent that initially, I received it at the last meeting from Dean Ferran because it was sent to the wrong address. I sent you an email to that effect. So,
I actually sent it to every single person.
Cindy, since then, your comments are posted on our website in the section for public comments for that August 31st meeting. They've been posted. They're up.
Okay, I would also like to say that I agree with Bill. There's too many uncertainties as far as what will be actual and what is like maybe what if, and you know, we don't have an actual, you know, number of how many people will actually use this district, whether the economy will fall out in 2 years and everything stops building again like we just saw from 2015. So I definitely agree with Bill on that side of it. And also for, you know, I may not be, my house is for sale and I have to decide whether I'm going to stay or leave this particular Swan Lake or buy in Liberty or whatever. And I have to say that every person that has come to see my house is talking taxes. And I've had 15 people come and 15 people go in the last 2.5 years that have said, nope, can't afford the taxes and we're afraid of what's coming. So that's exactly what I want the board to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the?
Anyone else for public comment?
Okay, here. State your name, please.
My name is Joel Rosenfeld. I'll make my comments very briefly because everybody is taking very long. I want to make two comments. First of all, I'm the director of a summer camp, which is right out of the sewer district. We built our own plant. We have a very old plant, but we just built our own plant 2 years ago at a cost of $600,000. And had there been the opportunity to join the Swan Lake Sewer District, even as an outer district user, we're right by the friend at Loomis Road, we would have gladly paid money to to join and then pay yearly fees. And because we didn't have that opportunity, basically we had to take a whole swath of land, which everybody sees when they pass Route 55, and have these ugly sand beds laid out on acres and acres of land. And had this been part of this bigger sewer district, it would have, been better for the environment and for everybody's, so everybody that passes would have seen nice trees rather than sand beds. That's that. Additionally, I own property in Swan Lake that I would love to develop. I heard today for the first time that I can't even put up my own package treatment plant if I want to. I always thought that I want this plant because it'll be cheaper and more cost effective and makes sense to develop rather than building our own plant for a couple $1 million. So basically, I mean, here in the United States, especially people that believe in the Constitution and rights, we have property rights. I have a property, I'm paying in capital reserves, as you say, even on vacant land, and yet I can't get sewer if this project doesn't happen, and I can't even build my own sewer plant. So basically, my hands are tied, and my property rights are being taken away, which doesn't make sense. So I think that this is an additional thing that should be, thought about when the board votes on this project. And for one thing about cost, obviously, as new development comes in, the cost will be shared. But if new development does not come in, Swan Lake Sewer District might look like what happened to Village of Liberty, where you have a lot of vacant houses, and instead of costing $1,500 per user, there'll be less users, and a few years from now, it'll cost $5,000 per user. So by adding more capacity and getting more people to pay in, I believe that's the right way going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Anyone else for public comment?
My name is Len. I'd just like to add just one more thought. We keep on hearing the word about new development, if they're being allowed, they're not being allowed. I think that the board is the one that's basically reviews all the studies, all the comments, what the town has, the people have of how to enact new laws, make changes, and be development friendly or be development unfriendly. So it's not, I wouldn't call it if it's allowed development. I believe it's totally depending on the town. The town is inviting responsible development and nice development that would be able to answer the discretion of the town to be able to invite a developer that has a proven track record of developing a nice parcel that would work for the people in the town and for the newcomers. And of course, all that works. Every developer comes in, spend hundreds of millions of dollars in developments, shall be down in the city, shall be up here in Sullivan County, and the few $1 million and a couple of dollars that you guys ask for sewer treatment plant, I don't think any developer that feels invited and feels as a friendly person at the table that would at all have an issue with chipping in. So it's not about if we're going to have future developers. No, developers are around. The question is the town is interested in bringing them to the table. And of course, nobody's talking about doing irresponsible development. We're talking about totally normal development that's being done all around the state And there is their funding, and the town wants to have that funding, then it's totally up to the town board members.
Thank you. Laura, could you get that gentleman's name?
Mendel. Mendel.
Okay, thank you, Mendel. Nancy?
I would like to say that responsible development is always very welcome. But I think that one thing that absolutely needs to be considered is Stanton Corner Road. Right now, you have a development on Leak Hole Road where they knock down every tree, I might add. However, as it is before this development, if you came up Old White Lake Turnpike to turn on Stanton Corner, you're taking your life in your hands, as you all will know. And I think that what must be considered, and homeowners, developers, whoever is coming in needs to consider what we can do about Stanton Corner Road before anybody builds anything, because as it is now, you can't park at the post office because all the spots are taken. You've been trying for a year now, Frank, to get 2 signs taken down in Swan Lake so that the Italian restaurant has parking. And the sewer plant is coming, and it should come, and we need it. There's not a question. But what has to be considered is not just people who have property and people who want to have a development or a house or whatever. Stanton Corner Road has to be considered, because as it is now, there's a tremendous impact on what's already in Swan Lake that it can't handle. That's all.
I don't normally do this in public comment, but I did speak with the folks from FEMA who are working on this hazard mitigation plan just this last week. So they're finalizing their plan, and Stanton Corners Road was one of the areas that we identified that should be part of that plan.
Good.
Hopefully, then that opens the door for, proper studies, engineering, and things like that. Anyone else? Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. This public hearing remains open for public comment via email. Again, that's Supervisor DeMayo@townofliberty.org. And that will be open until April 27th. Okay? Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate your time.